Well, hello and welcome to another Irv rant. I'm at the Queen of Heaven Cemetery in Hillside, Illinois. The monument in front of us is the monument to the Our Lady of Angels fire. I think that was 1959 on the west side of Chicago. Over 100 people died and 30 plus people were so burned up that they were buried in a common grave here in Hillside, Illinois. So why do I mention that? Well, this is the plague edition of an Irv rant. And some background about myself: I'm a historian, and I got into that through family history. I'll touch on that yet again. That's been in some of the other rants. Catastrophe theory is interesting, and it goes like this. It's the study of disasters. And to kind of take you along on the study really fast, a lot of disasters don't happen because of any one single cause. There's usually a series of causes. In the case of the Our Lady of Angels fire, they were operating with a functionally obsolete fire code. They had open stairwells. They had a rotten alarm system. The human element really wasn't trained to behave like we do in a modern emergency. For example, the teachers at Our Lady of Angels, they were not given the personal authority to evacuate the kids. They were told they had to wait for an alarm or a superior or something like that. So there was at least one classroom while this place is going up in this huge inferno. The teacher refused to dismiss the class. If I remember the story right, there were two kids that said the heck with this, and they just got the heck out of there and left. All power to them. So we're in the middle of this plague thing, and so what's going on? Let's talk catastrophe theory. One of the things that happens is you need to consider the ripples of your existence, your orbits, and what's going on with everybody else's orbit. Emergency services, quite frankly, is swamped. There are no extra materials, masks, anything out there. If you get hurt, if you get sick at this point in time, and there goes a hearse the other direction. If you get sick at this point in time, do you think that you're going to have the same odds of recovery as you would have had, say, a year ago? Oh, heck no. So you have to recognize that. So really, you know, you don't want to get all paranoid and freaked out and everything, but you need to consider stuff. Say, for example, we have maxed out all of the emergency services, and then there is a local disaster, the train crash, the plane crash, the bus crash, or a parallel epidemic of some sort. People are freaking out and they're not taking care of themselves. Sanitation in a lot of ways has gone to hell. Diphtheria or something could break out. Typhus. So, yeah, you need to overlay that into what's going on. So, no, you're probably not going to be in the big plane crash or anything. But if there is another disaster, that's even more resources that will be taken away from you. All right. It's really sad when you talk about these disasters, and, second, what do they say? Hindsight is 20/20. You can look back and with total confidence say, oh, I would have seen that flaw. Well, let's go back in time and look at some disasters. Does anybody remember the nightclub fire in Rhode Island? Should never have happened, but the band that was there, for whatever reason, they decided to put on like a pyrotechnic show where they were shooting flames towards the ceiling. and nobody within the place realized that the ceiling was loaded up with styrofoam. Ceiling ignites, you have liquid rain, and I can't remember how many people died. A lot of them got jammed up at the entrances. Flames never touched them. They were crushed or suffocated to death. There was a nightclub here in the Chicago area. I think it was in the South Loop somewhere. The way I remember this one, was a second floor club. It was a long, skinny stairway to get up there, and it was crowded. It was probably overcrowded, and some asshat got in trouble up there, and this is what I remember. It's some sort of like pepper spray or something got discharged. Everybody started freaking out and running for the door at the same time. A bunch of people tumbled down the stairs, and then there was a layered pile of bodies down there. I think it was like 20-some people died. Some of the people connected with the club were taken to court. I want to say somebody went to jail, but I can't recall that all that much. 100 years ago in Chicago was the Great Iroquois Theater Fire. On that one, they had built the theater with all sorts of state-of-the-art fireproofing and emergency exits and stuff, but there was incredible amount of human neglect. For example, they were running the theater without having all the fire protection completed. The one I always remember is there was a big fire escape that led out to a platform over the alley, 2 stories over the alley. The door was unlocked, everything was ready to go. The people started evacuating out there, and it was then they discovered that nobody had installed the ladder or stairs for the last 2 floors down to the alley floor. So it was described as a human waterfall. The people from behind were panicked and kept pushing forward and pushed the other people right off that platform. This was also the same fire that when the fire started, they did have an asbestos curtain within the theater. They lowered the asbestos curtain immediately, but it jammed. It jammed where the bottom would be about 6 feet off the floor. And the second guessers love this one because they're looking at that and they're saying, you know, if the curtain had gone all the way down, it probably would have kept the fire on the stage. If they hadn't dropped the curtain, the fire would have moved slowly, but since the curtain was only 6 feet over the floor, well, it created a draft, and that draft went out into the auditorium and it ignited all the materials in the auditorium. So, state-of-the-art theater. I can't remember how many people died. I think it was like 600 plus died in that theater fire. Something to think about and something to take to heart. All these people went in to enjoy a show, and they put the trust in their lives with somebody else's hands. Okay, they trusted their lives to somebody else. Most of the time you can do that. Okay, yeah. Well, maybe not so much anymore. You know, you got to play the percentages now. The Coconut Grove nightclub disaster. I want to say that was Boston, 1943. In this case, it was the motif of the club. They decided it was going to be like a Polynesian or Hawaiian shtick, and so everything was done with like fake palm trees and fake grass and reeds and hula skirts and tiki torches and lanterns. So when it did get sparked off, the whole place went up immediately, and this was another example of little details that got overlooked that created a bigger disaster. So yeah, they should have never had all this flammable crap up around the ceiling and the walls. The other big problem was the exit doors swung inwards. So when the mob hit the doors could not be opened because more and more people were piling up behind them and nobody had the strength to pull a door open. So of the 100 and some people that died in that disaster, okay, most of them were never touched by the flames. They were crushed, they were suffocated. So the modern disaster, the plague, darn it. Well, the scientists have some pretty good advice out there. You know, stay the heck away from people. Just stay the heck away from people. Okay, this train's not moving at all. I mean, it's not moving at all, but this guy is going to wait here. Well, this is a legendary maneuver here in this town. The legend part of it, as long as you make a full stop, they won't bug you. Watch out, though, if you're ever at an intersection with the double yellow line showing the lanes. That one they'll pop you on. Okay, so the modern crisis, stay away from people. You got to watch your orbits. They're talking about the youth who think they're invulnerable. What they do is they go out to spring break. They get liquored up, they go dancing, they infect themselves back and forth. They're probably going to stay healthy. They're probably healthy enough to beat the darn thing. However, the example everybody's saying is, you know, these guys are just going to go on home and infect grandma and grandpa, infect mom and dad. So, yeah, you got to think about your footprint and then how your orbit affects the other people around you. All right, food and panic buying. Well, if you're already listening to this going, oh my God, what am I going to do about food? What am I going to do about supplies? Well, you kind of missed the starting gun, didn't you? This is something you should have been doing all along, and this is something I'll encourage the rest of you for the future if you haven't already figured it out. You got to take advantage of the surplus, of the bounty, while it exists. So if there are 4 cans of soup on the shelf and you only need 1, well, maybe you should buy 2, and every time you go to the store, buy 1 extra can. In the old days, that's what the family did. Why, this looks like light power coming up. I'll be darned, I believe it's light power. Okay, I gotta get out of here and do a rail fan video. Okay, life does not stop. It also means I get to narrate this one. So in the event I use this as a single clip, that's too close to the tracks. If I use this as a single clip, it'll be edited out in new context. So we got, looks like 4 locomotives coming up. I have no idea what the guy's doing walking. He is going super slow. So there's this train here that's stopped, and it stretches all the way back to Proviso. There's some sort of announcement on the station at the on the speakers down there. I can barely hear it. It's either saying danger, another train coming, or danger, another plague coming. I don't know. All right. So pretty much what I'm leading up to is you got to open up your eyes. You got to really start thinking for yourself. You get yourself jammed up. You get yourself into trouble right now. The resources to fix things are no longer in existence. If you thought obtaining medical resources was outrageous in the past, well, guess what? It's going to be even worse now. Now, even after the so-called plague is over, you're going to have tens of thousands of emergency personnel who are absolutely exhausted. You're going to have all sorts of people that are just completely burned out. And then think about this. What's going on at the medical schools right now? So all the schools are out, right? So we're not going to have a graduating class of doctors this year unless they do the double secret blessing or something like that, and let these guys out early. And then nobody's studying. Very few people are doing their research unless it's all medical research. So, you know, if your favorite cause was like fighting ovarian cancer or something like that, and that's something you felt strongly about, and that's where your nickels and dimes were going, and that was your big donation, well, they might not have the ability to study and to research that stuff anymore. A lot of these not-for-profits are just going to die up. Some of them good, because they're nothing but blood-sucking scum. There's a lot of these so-called for-profits. You know, what they do is, if you look at their financial statement, it shows that for every dollar donated, 95 cents goes to keep themselves going. It goes to pay for the lights, the water, the administrative staff, you know, lunches, company car, cottage up in northern Michigan, you know, and only a nickel goes to the cause, you know. On the other hand, there are really good organizations like the Salvation Army where 95 cents of every dollar goes out into the community, and they only need the 5% to maintain their organization. All right, so that's all going to change up. You know, people are going to really have a new set of priorities. There's going to be different levels of volunteerism. Let's take this back to catastrophe theory. Well, okay, so we've talked about tired people. We've talked about differences in the way people are going to perceive things. The economy is afloat right now, or it's sinking, depending on who you talk to. I like the word adrift. It's a drift. Nobody knows what's going to happen. So, what, you know, here's the train again. So a hypothetical would be like, what if the guy at the railroad yard is a brand new employee who's totally overworked and stressed, and he doesn't tie down or lock down or do the job he is supposed to do, and as a consequence there is a mega disaster. Oh, I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to happen at all. But you need to open up your eyes to the fact that tired and sick people will make mistakes. So how do you mitigate that? Well, stay home. And think about everything behind what they are telling you. Goofy example. A couple weeks ago I saw a news story. Somebody was up at the bar, not anywhere around here. I think this was East Coast or something. Flaming drinks. You ever have a flaming drink? Well, when the bartender sparked off this person's flaming drink, it ignited the drinker. And the drinker had to go to the hospital, like 3rd-degree burns, or it was something really nasty. Now, here's a little factoid for you. Like, in the entire Chicago area, do you know how many burn beds there are? If you get a major burn, I think it's like 3 hospitals in the area: Loyola, University of Chicago, and maybe Lutheran General. If you add up all their burn beds for the specialty, I think it's like 10 or 12 altogether for the entire Chicago area. So if there's a fire and the resources are scarce, well, yeah, tired people make mistakes. When you go to the grocery store now, okay, everything's probably fine at the grocery store. You're in good shape. You're probably not going to get infected if you do your social distancing, you wash your hands and all that. But what if you're not paying attention and you grab up some spoiled food or something that's really out of date? Then you take it home and somebody in your family consumes it, right? Okay, so now you got somebody with food poisoning, E. coli, botulism, something really bad and nasty. There's that light power again. It's waiting to go in the yard. Are there going to be resources? Are there going to be drugs? You know, if you go to the hospital with this, doesn't that mean that you're going to be treated by a dozen medical professionals that all have been exposed to the plague? Some of you are starting to wake up. Okay, so what do you do about obtaining food? What do you do about obtaining water and things like that? Well, first off, there is no threat to the water supplies. I'll talk about that later on. The water supplies are fine. You don't need bottled water. Okay, if you've been going around for the last 5 years with your giant coffee mug thingy in your car, well, use that to carry your water around. I mean, if you absolutely have to have that pure bottle of water in your coat pocket or your purse or something for later on, yeah, that's okay, but you would have done that anyways, right? Okay, just don't be buying the water because you think you're going to be living on your water. You're actually setting yourself up for waterborne bacteria. Water in bottles only stays good for so long, and it starts to go bad on you. Those of you who still have the Y2K supplies with the 8 cases of water downstairs, I would use that water to wash dishes. I would use it to flush toilets. I would not consume it unless it was boiled and purified first. All right, so contingency stuff. Yeah, nobody ever thinks about contingency stuff. Here we are. It's spring now. We just went through the change of seasons. Guess what? We got gardening. How many of you are going to be a gardener this year? Well, even if you're the world's worst gardener or do-it-yourselfer, you can always put a couple flower pots out on the window ledge or on your back patio or in your driveway or your neighbor's driveway, whatever, and you could grow some tomato plants, right? You can grow some peppers. This is the time to start thinking about it. Did you buy your extra bag of potatoes? What are you going to do with them? Are you going to eat them? Well, before you throw out those spoiled potatoes that have all the sprouts coming out of them, think about planting them in the backyard. You're going to cut that potato into quarters, and each piece needs to have an eye or a stem on it, and you just plant it in. Hopefully it's some loose ground, maybe sandy, with the eye up, and hopefully in a few more months you'll have potatoes. Going to the store, what should you be buying? Well, if you're buying stuff in a can, like the spaghetti in the can or ravioli in the can, it's really kind of a waste of resources and money. You should be buying staples. You should be buying the flour, the rice. One that nobody's talking about is lard. You know, fat, pure fat. What can you do with lard? Well, you throw a slice of lard, a spoonful of lard into a pan, you heat it up, you sprinkle in a bunch of flour and breadcrumbs, maybe a couple chunks of meat, and you stir it all up, you cook it, and it'll look absolutely horrible. It'll taste all right. It'll taste like some fast food nugget. But it'll get you going in an emergency. If you buy a 5-pound bag of flour and a tub of lard, literally, that's where the phrase comes from, tub of lard. If you do that, your dollar benefit is going to take you a lot further if you spent the same amount of money on the spaghetti and the ravioli. Okay? The masks. Everybody's afraid of the masks. Well, guess what? Those old dust masks won't stop the virus, but they will stop like 80% of all the other airborne crap. They might not stop the virus, but they might stop somebody's big-ass spit wad that's hanging there in the air waiting for you to absorb. It's all about reducing it by percentages. You got to play the percentages. So here's one that nobody's talking about yet. Coffee filters. Coffee filters are great because in the emergency you can use them to filter water to some extent, or at least get the solid cruds out. And if you make a layered mask with the rubber bands and string coffee filters, no, it won't protect you against the coronavirus if you go into the hospital, into the emergency room where everybody's sick. But if you're just going over to the grocery store and you're washing your hands and face, well, that mask might keep some crap away. All right. In other words, a flimsy barrier is better than no barrier at all. However, you have to consider the fact that it is a flawed idea. You're playing the percentages here. You just want to knock everything down. All right, people are talking about bleach for sanitation. Everybody's been buying out the bleach, and some of the local merchants are profiteering on bleach. I paid $6.99 for a gallon of Clorox. I actually did that, bought 2 at the same time. No, I didn't feel good about that because I usually pay just under $3 for the same bleach. So yeah, I got gouged, but the bleach is a high demand item. Another one you can go down to is vinegar. White distilled vinegar. It'll clean. Yes, it will clean. It'll kill some of the germs. I don't know if it'll kill all the coronavirus, but it'll easily kill quite a bit of the other germs. Okay, the maintainers were up. They're still over there. If you look at some of my railroad videos from Hillside, Illinois, some of the more recent ones, I've been showing the condition of the roadbed over here. Okay, we have a police officer in the lot, and they always do that, so there's nothing sinister there. And then the maintainer is off to the right there behind the hill. I'll try to move the camera when we get over there. So the roadbed goes up and down, and here's an example of potential catastrophe theory. Right now, everybody's self-absorbed with the plague. Nobody's thinking about the condition of the roadbed. This is the track that goes through Elmhurst. Okay, that's where the guys are. They're replacing and welding track. Maybe the rail broke, I don't know. But they've been over there several times now in the last, the last couple weeks. I can see a flame, and I can see something smoking and burning, so I'm not sure what that's about. They might be doing the thermite welding, which is really cool. Okay, railroad tracks. How many of you Elmhurst residents are aware that a train derailed near York Commons Park back in the mid-late 70s? It was like 76, 77. It was like 5 coal cars went off the tracks on the embankment. It landed in the backyards of some houses on Cayuga. From what I understand, there is still coal in some of those backyards off of Cayuga. All right, so everything is locked down, everybody's flipping out. So what happens if the train derails? Did any of you ever see my video on train fire? Same tracks we're talking about. It was an ethanol train going westbound. The buffer car was a big old gondola of some sort, an open hopper, and there was trash, there was debris in it. All right, here comes an ambulance. Okay, that's Bellwood. Going to Elmhurst Hospital. Nobody thought about the condition of the roadbed there in Elmhurst in 76, 77. Everybody took it for granted. There'll be no problems. And then you had the train crash. 8 or 10 years ago, when that ethanol train came through and the buffer car was on fire, I was going, oh, well, it was an empty train going west. Oh, it's a good thing it was empty. And somebody pointed out to me, said that the vapors inside of a tank car are much more dangerous than the actual alcohol cooking off. So, okay. So, yeah, what would the community do now if there is a rail derailment, you know, train derailment? Well, everything's overstretched, so the cleanup people would be slowed down. The emergency responders are going to be slowed down. If you live on Cayuga and the train derails or something, well, you might have a train car in your backyard for 3 more years or something. All right. I'm on the county line. I'm going past the DuPage Water Commission and their reservoir. Again, I don't worry about the water. We get our water from Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan is in itself a giant reservoir, and since the lake is so darn full, it's literally overflowing this last 2 years, we're going to have okay water. So as long as we have the operators who are there in Chicago with the City of Chicago Water Department, as long as they're able to operate their end of it, they will hand off the water to the DuPage Water Commission. That guy cut the corner way too fast. They hand off the water to the DuPage Water Commission at the Harlem Avenue pumping station. It gets pumped out to Elmhurst, right here in the county line. Right here is about some of the highest ground in the entire area, which is why they chose this. And then the water, a lot of it flows by gravity to the other communities in DuPage. And then when they set up the Water Commission, one of the requirements of the members of the Water Commission, all these different towns, the requirement was you all have to have that storage capacity for water, which is why Elmhurst has 3 underground tanks, Butterfield Park, where the lumber yard used to be, and up on North York. And then if you go through all these other towns, like right off of 88 at 355, you'll see a pair of giant above-ground storage tanks. I think that's Lyle's tanks or something like that. Every town is required to have like at least 3 days of water on hand. All right, so you don't really need the water, and if the water supply did get contaminated, chances are you're going to be able to boil or treat it with bleach, water conditioning pills, and the other one that nobody is talking about because the supplies are still readily available. Go up to Walmart and get the swimming pool chemicals. You know, Pool Shock? Yeah, they got the chlorine that you put in your swimming pool. If you got a swimming pool, you could theoretically make drinking water. You'd be doing your friends, family, neighbors a favor if you do that. Incidentally, if you do have an above ground pool, yeah, keep it at least half filled this year. Fill it up all the way, whatever you think is appropriate. Firefighting. I'm assuming our fire departments are going to be in excellent shape. We're not going to have any problems with the fire department. However, if firefighters get incapacitated and there is a slowdown of response, it's going to be on you to get everybody out of the house. Do that first. Call it in. And then if you have water or buckets of sand or something available and it's a tiny fire, you might have a shot at saving everything you own. Neighbors. You need to organize with your neighbors. Have you ever bothered to get to know your neighbors? To know who your neighbors are? Are any of your neighbors serial arsonists or axe killers? Well, yeah, it pays to know who they are. For example, I know one neighbor who's a paramedic. I have another neighbor who's a medical doctor. One neighbor has a daughter who's an emergency room nurse. Resources. You know, you need to know where those resources are, because if that ambulance gets delayed in reaching you because there's a backlog of 12 people begging for help, and your wife, your daughter, or something like that is in agony and you got to do something, well, it's good to know that there's people in the neighborhood. If you've never studied first aid, well, guess what? It's already too late. However, there is enough time still to learn the basics of how to put on a bandage and how to do some other stuff. If you are blessed with somebody in your neighborhood or family that knows that stuff and you think you can take a chance in some improvised class, you might be able to set up a garage, you know, with one instructor and 4 students. Keep the social distancing, and they'll tell you how to set a bone or whatever. Okay, here's the Salt Creek Road construction here. I have no idea what these guys are doing. Could you imagine if you're having your house remodeled and 2 weeks ago they opened up the back of your house and they said, we'll be back to finish it next week, and suddenly all your contractors have disappeared? Oh, that would be a pretty big suck. Yeah, this is why there's a history of people learning to do all sorts of things for themselves. Yeah, your kids should have been taught how to change out a toilet, how to use a hammer and nails. Hopefully you've trained your kids on how to clean toilets, rake yards, and dig holes. Kids are great for gardening, you know, and if they're resistant, you know, you send your 6-year-old out to till the garden and he starts crying, I can't do this. Well, it's real simple. You say you don't eat until you finish your job. And believe me, people seem to respond to that. All right, I'm going past Elmhurst Hospital right now, and the parking lot for the most part looks filled. I'm coming out to the side where the so-called Center for Health is. And we have cars over there, we have cars over there. So the Center for Health is like a clinic with a lot of doctors' offices. It looks like, yeah, that lot is pretty filled. So people are going in for tests. They have like 2 different test setups at Elmhurst Hospital. One is for the clinic, the other's for the hospital itself. Last year, middle of the year, I had to go in for testing, and they felt that my thing needed to be accelerated. If I had waited on the clinic side, they would have scheduled me. I would have had to wait 4 days. But on the hospital side, they were able to get me in within 24 hours, provided I drank the magical mixture that makes things move. No fun. They had to put me out. They scoped me from the mouth down to the exit, and yeah, I definitely was asleep for that one. And then after all that, guess what? Didn't find anything. Oh, there were a couple things. I got this gut doctor who likes saying things to me like, well, you've beaten cancer twice! You beat cancer twice! And I'm like, well, yeah, I appreciate your marketing. Yeah, I'm going to keep coming back to this guy because he keeps finding cancer. Maybe if I switch doctors and get a doctor that doesn't find the cancer, I'm going to do all right, you know? Weird logic here. You got to take care of yourselves. You got to recognize your own body's ability to do things. And there's not going to be do-overs. You know, the day of the do-over is gone. You just can't do it over anymore. You have to work it all out ahead of time. You know, if you want to take your family on a Saturday day trip out to somewhere in Western Illinois or something, well, you're going to have to work it out where medical resources are, just in case. You're going to have to start putting together your own first aid kits and bug out bags and stuff like that. You're going to have to think in terms of supplies, you know, the gasoline. Everything's still getting delivered, but as we all know, some things are going out of stock. So what will happen? Do we go back to the old Soviet Union where we trade information? This morning they got bratwurst at the South store, but no vegetables. But the North store has the vegetables, but no bratwurst. Which store has the better beer? Which store has the swill beer? You know, you're not going to really know this until the last second. So, you know, what are you going to do? Do you carry tools in your car? Do you have a real spare tire in your car? Your kids, your family. What happens if they take the car out and they break down? Okay? Oh, okay, you're going 3 towns over to go visit your cousin. Yeah, everything's fine there, you know. That should be fine. And then the kid gets halfway there and the car breaks down. Are there really a lot of tow truck companies operating right now? If you can get it towed, is the mechanic still alive and working? All right. Are you working this one out in your heads yet? So maybe you don't let the kid go out and investigate, maybe visit. Maybe what you do instead is put everybody on the internet and you do a video visit. Or if it's imperative, if you absolutely have to deliver the kid and maybe some supplies to grandma, well, don't think about a spare tire, think about spare transportation. You know, maybe throw a bicycle into the trunk, back seat or something like that. A couple bottles of water, a stack of crackers. Anytime you go anywhere, what if you get jammed up? You know, what if you're on the Eisenhower and you're not taking the train anymore, you're driving your car, and the milk truck wipes out in front of you, and you get kind of like stuck in that jam of 1,000 cars, and you aren't going to get past there until they find a tow truck and clean it up. Well, yeah, in that case, the water and crackers in the car is going to see you through. The Quickie Marts. Everybody's used to the Quickie Marts. They'll probably still be around, but you might not be able to get the supplies when you need them. So I'm northbound on York Street. I'm approaching St. Charles. The other day I took you past where Carl Sandburg used to live. This time I'm going to take you past the high point in town, and immediately to my left is where the big estate used to be of Thomas Barbour Bryan. He had this whole corner here. It was like 100 acres, 400 acres. He had his mansion there, and in the mansion he had his own chapel, which became the second operating church in what was then the village of Cottage Hill. Thomas Bryan was the guy who in 1868 suggested the name of Elmhurst, and that's how we changed the name of the town to Elmhurst. Cottage Hill was originally called Cottage Hill because this is the high ground. Oh, off to the left over there, and there was a single house cottage there. It was a stagecoach stop in the area. The neighborhood just got to be known as Cottage Hill, Hill Cottage. But later on, when there was more people, the Postmaster General told the people in this town, they said, if you ever want to get your mail on time, change the name of your freaking town. Do you know how many Cottage Hills there are in the country? Do you know how many hill cottages there are in the country? So that's when they came up with the unique name of Elmhurst. I don't know if you can see this little bit of a rise right here, but this is the high ground that Hill Cottage was on. Right in this general area was where the Bird's Nest Chapel stood. That was the name they gave to the church that Thomas Bryan started. Thomas Bryan was an interesting guy because he was a personal friend of Abraham Lincoln. When Lincoln got assassinated, Bryan was one of the ceremonial pallbearers. Bryan knew Lincoln from the days when they rode the circuit together here in Illinois. Bryan ended up his career by being the United States ambassador to the court of St. James, in other words, Great Britain. And he actually did really well, and he was a great influence on the town, and he understood disaster. And in 1871, when the Chicago fire was going, Thomas Bryan at his mansion here in Elmhurst sheltered probably 2 or 3 dozen people, and he did that for quite some time. So I'm going past York High School. By the way, the class of 80 rules. Education. Who's going to educate your kids? Who's going to educate yourself? Have any of you sat down yet during this crisis to even read up on the virus? Are you trusting the mainstream media for that? Well, again, resources are stretched thin. When you need to get the resources, when there is the emergency, you're probably not going to have the time to do any in-depth reading in an attempt to find your own personal cure. That is why you need to start thinking of things now and put your head on straight so you can have knowledge available at your fingertips before it's too late. Knowing how to take care of yourself if you're on your own for 72 hours with no supplies, I think that's a very, very good thing to do. I just made a right turn from westbound St. Charles Road to northbound Illinois 83, going past the little mall here. The Sears Kmart closed down a long time ago, so that's nothing to do. Now we're going past the Portillo's. Portillo's, I guess, is still open. Yeah, the drive-thru's there. I wouldn't mind Portillo's today. I guess Shoe Carnival is shut down. Yep, Shoe Carnival. Education ahead of time. So, yeah. You want to have as many cards as possible. You want to have as many resources as possible. So you need to know stuff. Where are you going to go if your house does have a fire? If an ambulance goes out of control and drives through the front of your house and flattens half of your house, where are you going to go? Have you thought of any of this stuff ahead of time? That's what education is all about. You preload your brain with the resources. Now, I'm giving you ridiculous examples, of course, but that's catastrophe theory. Everybody thinks that the paradigm will stand solid and not be questioned, not be destroyed. So you have to question everything from your head to your toes, from your house to your garden. You have to think for yourself and protect yourself. If you are looking up something on the internet at the time of emergency, yeah, it's already too late. You're messed up. You're screwed. And I'll give you an example here of breaking my own, Secretary of State Police. Breaking my own rules. Yes, I am driving around. I am exposing myself. I'm at one of the worst intersections in the entire state of Illinois, North Avenue and Route 83. If there was a car collision at this point and I had to go to the hospital, well, shame on me, right? Shame on me. I'm needlessly exposing myself. However, again, I'm a lifetime resident of this town, this city. I know my way around. I literally know where the bodies are buried. I know what the resources are. And in the city of Elmhurst, I investigated the emergency resources a long time ago. I got into that from Cold War history. Take a look at the channel, take a look at my playlist, and you'll see there's a Cold War history playlist. Few people realize that from the 50s to the 70s, there were surface-to-air missiles in the Chicago area. There was like 12 bases that had surface-to-air missiles. They don't exist anymore, but the memory is there for a lot of people. The Cold War concept of preparation and prepping and being ready for the nuclear war, a lot of people laughed at the preppers. You know, there's still a lot of people out there who are planning to live through a nuclear war. You know, in the Chicago area, if we're going to get zapped by the big old nuke, I mean, there's not too much we can do to protect ourselves. On the other hand, all those people who are paranoid the last 50 years, 75 years, and they kept putting supplies away and putting supplies away, you know, they might still be paranoid, but all the same, they are prepared. Okay, I'm coming off of the 83 ramp. I am now going eastbound on Lake Street, US 20. Off to my left is where the old Elmhurst Airport used to be up through the 1950s. It's where Patton Equipment has a lot of their stuff. Now, Elmhurst is blessed to have Patton Equipment here, because if we ever do have like the earthquake disaster or the multiple plane crash disaster or something like that, we have all sorts of bulldozers and cranes available, and we just have to help ourselves to the supplies, if you know what I mean. Elmhurst is prepared. They've done this for a long time, going all the way back to the 40s and World War II. They were ready for air raids and all sorts of stuff like that. Once you got through the 60s, you know, then they were thinking about there was going to be the thermonuclear war that we could win, live through. But then they started going over to, I think then it was ESDA, it was Civil Defense, and they got called ESDA, Emergency State Disaster Agency. And then we had FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and then over on top of that it became Homeland Security. So basically what happens is the individual agencies, the individual towns were instructed decades ago to come up with plans for emergencies. In Elmhurst, they have a couple of places that are essentially basements that are fortified. They're set up with the phone wires, with radio antennas. They can operate in the event the grid goes down. Elmhurst also has a luxury, it's like a recreational vehicle travel trailer that has its own like antenna tower and office, restroom, things like that. So if we lose the fixed points of command, we have a mobile point of command. The mobile point of command is actually more along the lines of, should the plane crash happen, they'll drive the mobile command center out there, and then they'll run the rescue from there. So yeah, our fire chiefs, our police chiefs, the officers, the firefighters, they've been trained in emergency disaster. I don't know if you've ever noticed that the Elmhurst Fire Department does this on a regular basis, and quite often you go down to fire station number 2, south end of town there off of York Street, near Cayuga, near the Canadian National, and you'll see all sorts of fire vehicles, apparatus from other towns. They do table exercises. They've been doing this for years. They set up an imaginary hypothetical disaster, and then they start pulling the resources in, and then they debrief at the end of it to see what resources they ran short of and what resources they had a surplus of. In other words, emergency services for years has been trying to make this a science. I would go one more step and say it's like a science art sort of thing. You might have heard the phrase medical arts. Yeah, a good doctor is trained as a scientist, but you know something, there's also intuition involved with that. There's also leadership involved with that, and that's where the arts part comes in. You need to be able to cope with all the imponderables. And imponderable is a wonderful word. It's what nobody else thought of, what nobody else is thinking about. Okay, so in my situation, I was a borderline prepper. I never went too crazy on it. Again, my favorite joke for this disaster is toilet paper. Oh, I don't worry about toilet paper. If I need it, I'll just dip into my Y2K supplies. Well, Y2K, I bought a single case of water because I knew I'd be able to use a case of water in the future. And then I bought a bunch of staples. I bought flour and rice and beans. I kept those until I figured they'd gone rancid, and then they became garden compost. I didn't have to deal with all sorts of bad cans of spaghetti, ravioli, and bizarre vegetables and things like that. So along the way, what I also did is I paid attention to things like solar lights. Do you got those garden lights? Well, guess what? If you lose the power, your garden light might give you a reading light. Or if your kid has appendicitis and you were smart enough to read up ahead of time on how to use a spoon and a butter knife to remove the appendix, well, hey, you can use that light for your improvised operating room. Okay? Yeah, you want to take resources from something else that were pointed towards something else, reallocate them for your own situation. For example, the swimming pool chemicals I told you about. Instead of swimming, you can use them to purify water. So along the way, I did things like when I saw a chance to buy a camp stove that worked off of propane, I did that years ago. Just this last year, a friend of mine who is retired, moving away, says, oh, we have a Coleman lantern that works off of kerosene. I'm just going to throw that away. Would you like it? And I'm like, yeah. Okay, other stuff. Now, I've been blessed that I've been living in the same house structure for the last close to 60 years. Okay, if that doesn't concern you listeners, I don't know what else will. You know, we kept a lot of stuff like hardware. You know, when we did a repair and we ended up with the 3 extra paper clips, a nail, a zip tie, rubber bands, and things like that, well, we kept them all. So down in my cellar, I have have several coffee cans of bolts, several coffee cans of nuts. I have a giant shelf just dedicated to nails. I have a variety of nails. Thanks to my crazed landlord and my crazed father, both Korean War veterans who grew up in poverty, I don't throw away bad nails. Yeah, if you have a bent nail, you throw it in a can, and if worse comes to worse, you can hammer it straight and use it again. Okay? Scrap wood. You know, the real crap I got rid of, but, you know, out in the garage, I kept little pieces of 2x4s and plywood. If I lose a window, or if I have to build a table or something, right now I got hammer, I got nails, and I got wood. You know, I can make a pretty decent repair to quite a bit of stuff. The plumbing. So across the years, you know, I don't know how many times, you know, I've changed out a toilet or the flapper or something. So I'd buy an extra flapper ahead of time. I'd buy the extra wax seal. I'd buy the extra bolts. So here's one for you. Okay, everybody's favorite is the toilet, right? So quite a few people only have one toilet in their residence. So if the damn thing starts leaking and the seal blows out and the hardware stores are closed, what are you gonna do? Well, you're gonna be in a very damp restroom, and you're gonna have to have the mop, and hopefully whatever's underneath your restroom is gonna be taken care of and cleaned. Yeah, you start thinking about buying stuff ahead of time. If you're in a home, a residence, well, yeah, you're going to have to get yourself a collection of nails and some basic repair stuff. Start thinking about this stuff ahead of time. Don't wait for the failure. Don't wait for the failure. Get this stuff ahead of time. Okay, I'm going south on County Line Road. I'm paralleling 294, the Tri-State Tollway. The Tri-State's going to be widened out, and they're going to finally finish the interchange here. Oh, cool. They got 2 sets of power lines now. Part of this deal was these power lines that went in the 90s, I think it was very late 80s, early 90s. Do you see the ones that are like right on top of the tollway there? They got to move them all to the right because there's going to be all sorts of new ramps and stuff through here. I'm going past McMaster Car, and they're pretty good for a lot of stuff. The landlord was able to obtain a hand pump for the sump pump. So a lot of people, you know, they're thinking, oh, okay, well, if I lose power, my battery backup will keep the basement dry, or I got a generator and I can run the generator, which will power the sump pump. That'll keep the basement dry. The old man is crazed from abject poverty, and he thought it was a waste of money to use gasoline to pump out your basement. So he got me like some sort of marine bilge pump that's hand operated. It looks like it's a pump for a 55-gallon drum. It actually works. I can't believe it. I'll be down there for a day and a half anytime it rains for a quarter inch or more of rain. But hell, we'll be able to keep the basement dry. And this is an example of somebody who thought ahead of time and has put the tools on standby. Of course, this is also the same guy who thought the exact same thing could be done with a... you ever see a pump you can hook up to an electric drill? Yeah. So the landlord got one of those, and he got himself one of those Craftsman battery-operated drills, got himself a spare battery. This guy actually thought that a battery-operated drill with a drill pump would have enough power to pump out your basement. Yeah. Okay. So we live in Elmhurst. We know about the flooding here in town. If you're in the lowland and we got a plague going on, and all of a sudden this spring it starts raining heavily, can you count on the public works guys to come by to check all the catch basins? Okay, so even before the plague, this is one of my pet peeves, people wouldn't go rake out the curbs and rake out the catch basins. Favorite story is over on, I think it was the 700 block of Washington, just north of Madison. The street flooded. There was a little mob of people formed, close to 2 dozen people were all angry at flooding going on, and there was like almost a foot of water there in the street. It was up over the curbs, and finally the city guy pulls up in his bright yellow truck, and everybody, what, take you something? Yeah, this is what we pay taxes for. And the guy gets his, he got a rake out, and it took him a minute walking around in the floodwater with his boots. And then he found the catch basin. And then once he found the catch basin, he started raking the layer of leaves and wood chips off the top of the catch basin. And that's all it was like a 2-inch layer of junk that kept the catch basin from sucking all the water down. So once this guy removed the stuff, it took all of 10 minutes to drain the street. And the angry mob started to disappear when they gave him some stuff, and the guy just looks at him and said, "You people are adults, why didn't you get a rake and do this?" Now in my own neighborhood, south end of town, I heard one person complain, "Well, this is what we pay taxes for." Well, hell. You know, you got to learn to do stuff for yourself, and if you live in a low part of town, well, don't buy wood chip mulch, okay, because it's going to float up off of your shrubs, and it's going to go to the catch basin. The catch basin's going to get clogged, and your whole street and yard's going to get flooded out. So don't even do that to begin with. And then, if the street starts to flood, well, get your butt out there with a rake and a shovel, and get the neighbors out there with a rake and a shovel, and clean off the catch basins, and do that before it rains. Okay? The rainy season's coming up, and there's going to be a hell of a lot of deferred maintenance in this town, and the public works guys are probably going to be all at the sewage plant or working on the sewage lines. They might not have the time or the resources or the energy to come out to your block and clean up that one little mini disaster. Take charge of your own life and run your own life. Okay, here's a house. I can't tell if this one is a going to be a remodel or I can't tell if it's going to be a remodel or a tear down. They've taken all the windows out, and if I had to guess right now, I would say it's a remodel. It could be a tear down where they're letting people remove window frames and stuff like that. Just to my left is where the old Elmhurst Hospital was. Alright. Doubling back towards City Sentry. I'm on Schiller. Brand new house. Okay, there's the gas guy. That's the brand new clinic. They tore down the old clinic. Got a coal drag going. That's Wisconsin Power. WEPX on the reporting marks. That'll probably go up to the state line plant. And again today, there's a lot of people at the 7-Eleven. Okay, I'm going to skip going in there today. I'll see what the shell on the south end of town is like. just passing our police station, which is now functionally obsolete. Current chief of police wants to have it replaced because they don't have the space they should. In all fairness to the previous city administrations, nobody really saw in the 80s what the electronic wizardry was going to do with the internet and computers and storage, things like that. So quite a bit of a newly designed station would have to take into account the technological changes. Oh, that train ended right when I got up to York Street, so I'm going to double back through the alley, go back through behind where the police station is. Bad corner here. And again, notice that the commuter parking is pretty much empty here. Nobody's going into the city. So, survival. That's what a lot of people are going to try to sell you. A lot of this stuff is really cheesing me off now, especially when the advertising is manipulating and taking advantage of the whole disaster. You know, I really don't like that type of stuff. The best thing you can do is to help yourself, think for yourself, do a lot of questioning. Again, in Elmhurst, DuPage, the emergency services are pretty good. However, this is brand new territory for pretty much everybody involved. I really doubt that in all of Illinois there was more than half a dozen scientists who had thought this through and really seriously considered that it would happen, and I doubt even less of them had made any sort of personal preparation. You know, it's like the old man used to say, you could prepare for everything and then nothing's going to happen, and then what's going on with your resources? I believe in education. If you're listening to me, it means that you're either refuting my ideas, which is a good thing. I encourage that. I welcome that. Deny, deny, deny. Yes, I have a bias, and there is denial on my part. But the best thing people can do right now is start to wake up and realize that the era of subcontracting is over. The sinews of commerce have been cut. There is a new reality. We are all striving to try to put everything back to somewhat where we were in the past. However, should we have those resources? I'm not so sure. So what do you gotta do? Play the percentages and get everything you can on your side. You gotta line up all the dominoes in your favor. An analogy would be chess players. You know how chess players can think 3 moves ahead, 7 moves ahead, or in my case, you know, 47 moves ahead. You know, that's a good thing, to look beyond the horizon, to look off into the future, to see the possible futures. Do you play poker? Poker's a great game for those who have survived this damn thing. I've let a little bit of my information out, my hole card, okay? I probably don't want to be telling people that, okay, I know how to prep. You know, that might be putting myself at risk. The mob attacking the house. But I got plans for that also. You need... There's just no question about this. Think things through. Anticipate. Don't just assume there's going to be one and only one possible outcome. Even if you don't have the resources for all of the possible outcomes, think everything through and discuss it and have a plan. Okay, so let's say you're the family of 4 and one of the kids is trying to find his way home right now. And then something happens to the house and you guys have to leave. You know, the roof falls in, there's a tornado, an earthquake, there's a fire, or it's plague related, and you know, the health authorities have said you can no longer live here. Well, what do? If you were in the military, you'd have something called a rally point. A rally point, R-A-L-L-Y. That's where, if you are forced to leave your original location, everybody knows ahead of time and has planned ahead of time to go to the rally point. And from there, you'll have some sort of resources. That there you should have at least be ready to have a little bit of water, or maybe a single meal's worth of food, something. But yeah, if you got the kid on the other side of the country and they're coming home or whatever, you tell them, hey, if you get to Elmhurst and you find the house is no longer there, then we're going to go out to Aunt Effie's in Rockford, you know, something like that. Have the alternatives mapped out ahead of time. Have the alternatives mapped out ahead of time. And right now, I wish I had a super pickup like that. I could do a lot of stuff with a real pickup. Instead, I'm driving this like weird crossover minivan SUV thing. Oh God! At least it doesn't have sliding doors. At least it has hinge doors. That's a side note. You know, all the car dealers. You know, we might have hit the very first year where they're no longer gonna start selling by model year. Maybe they'll just go to one design that works, and one size fits all, and that's it for everybody. That would be truly interesting. Okay, so the gas on the corner here is $2.15. Traditionally, he is one of the higher prices in town. Across the street, it is $2.15 with wash, so he's the same. I talked to somebody who was up in Elmwood Park. Was $1.99, $1.19, which was surprising because that's Cook County and they have more taxes. So it might have been one of the cheapy gas stations where you get more water than fuel, more contaminants than clean. Yeah. So that reminds me of something else. The unfortunates in our society. I've kind of, well, talked about the hospital, and I would not want to be a medical professional. I think these people are great. They're the heroes of the hour, the heroes of the year, the heroes of the decade, quite possibly the heroes of the millennia. But I don't want to go anywhere near them. Okay, I don't want to get infected by them, and I got a feeling they don't want to be infected by me. And if they ever heard what I have to say, that gives them even more reason to stay the hell away. But one I heard this morning was, I was talking to somebody who has a child in prison, Illinois prison. The person's in a minimum to medium custody sort of thing. What I understand at this particular prison, they've locked the entire prison down. The inmates are in their cells. Hopefully it's not an overcrowded prison and there's only like 2 people per cell. Some of these prisons, you know, in order to boost capacity, they doubled up. You know, you got a 6x6 room and they put 2 sets of bunks in there. In a 6x6 room, you got 4 guys living. Okay? Could you imagine being in a prison with all the germs, the close proximity? Can you imagine being a prisoner and the amount of compassion you're going to have from your jailer? Could you imagine being in the prison and how many professionals are going to come your way and help you out? That ain't no good. that's gonna convince a lot of people never to go back to prison, which in itself is a good thing. However, it's a lesson I wouldn't want to wish on anybody. That's got to be terrible. All right, so I'm doubling back on Darmstadt. Darmstadt was named after the family that farmed in this area for well over 100 years. This is Hillside Avenue. We just passed the maintainers again. Hillside Avenue used to go across the tracks over there, but the mid-90s Eisenhower widening project eliminated that crossing, as well as several houses over there. This is the signal I always watch to see if anything's coming up the tracks, but since the maintainers are on the tracks, the signals are completely irrelevant. There's a lot of trash in that parking lot over there, the Pace Park and Ride lot. So do you think the village is going to send a guy out to clean it up this week, next week, the week after? No. If you're getting a little buggy in your home and you need something to do, clean up the street, go to the local park and clean up. Just be very, very careful that you don't cut yourself on something and give yourself hep. Yeah, you don't want to get hepatitis in a situation like this. You don't want to get an STD in a situation like this. I've heard a lot of people say, oh yeah, we're going to stay home and in 9 months there's going to be a baby boom. Do you really want to be a parent 9 months from now with an economy that's extremely shaky and with a supply system that might be sporadic? Okay? There's a consequence to sex. You might not be able to survive the consequence. You got kids? All right. Are they growing up a little faster than you might have thought? Have you thought, oh, they're still young, I don't have to worry about it? Well, you know, this has come up in history, and this is one of those stupid, rare facts that does happen. Okay, well, you want to hit on somebody. Well, the world's about to end, and I don't want to die without once more feeling the touch of a woman. The camera just gave me an editorial comment on that one. Yeah, so there's going to be all sorts of people that are hitting up your kids and using the disaster not as a reason for abstinence or chastity. Rather, they're going to use it as a motivator, as a manipulation to do your kid. Do you want that to happen? Well, think it through. Okay, so the kids are going out and they're hanging out with their friends. Do you really know what their friends' orbits are? So yeah, you've seen Tony and Vito have come over to the house quite a few times over the last couple of years. But then you find out, you know, next week that Tony and Vito's parents are both, you know, medical professionals, and they got the virus like 3 months ago. And Tony and Vito never bothered to tell you about it? Yeah. Before, you could kind of, you know, stick your head in the sand on what the kids were up to and stuff like that. But now, they can be carrying bad stuff into your home. So think about this ahead of time and anticipate it ahead of time. And you need to make a decision as to what you are going to do if you decide that you got to lock the place down even more. Alright, just some people at the funeral home here. I'm down in Hillside again. I'm on Roosevelt Road. I'm about to cross Mannheim. This is Mannheim here with their red light camera. There was good news in the last 6 weeks or so, and that was the state of Illinois is no longer cooperating with the red light camera people. I think so far I'm up to about 3 red light tickets. I think 2 of them were at that same intersection we just went through. I despise red light cameras. I wanted to create a militia group or a resistance army or something about red light cameras, you know, and I was going to model it on the Shining Path Maoist guerrillas of Peru. Those idiots, they were always blowing up the electric lines or the phone lines or something just because they were jerks and they could do it and stick it to everybody. But I always thought that if somebody took out a red light camera, I always thought they'd get a medal. Yeah. Can you imagine getting arrested for vandalizing a red light camera, and you get there and everything, and the judge, he's got like 3 red light camera tickets, and he tells the company to go to heck. That would be fun. Alright, this is the viaduct over the harbor belt. I'm going to take a quick look up and down the tracks. Nothing to the south, nothing to the north. There is a maintainer truck parked along the right-of-way down there. Okay, Broadview Missionary Baptist Church. They have just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Looks like maybe 5 cars there. I got a feeling some of the cars parked over there are actually neighbors' cars from the apartments. I'm going south on 25th. I'm in Broadview. The viaduct up there is the Canadian National. And we're about to run out of time on this rant. Let's see how much further we can go. So, folks, think for yourself. Investigate for yourself. Question the paradigm, question everything. I'm not saying go ape stuff on people. I'm not saying being rude. You do have to be firm. You do have to be powerful. You do have to have control of your own mind. But all the same, you need to think for yourself, and you need to have a certain level of education so you can think through all the information you've been given, and then you need to decide for yourself what is legitimate information and what is not. Okay, camera's still giving me warnings. The viaduct up there, that's the Cermak Road Viaduct, named after Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak, who was assassinated in Miami Beach in I want to say it was 1933, while he was riding alongside Franklin D. Roosevelt. For years, people have argued who was the true target of the assassination. Was the assassin going after Cermak, or was the assassin going after Franklin D. Roosevelt? So, as another note, that's 22nd Street. And if you're in Cook County, it's Cermak Road. But the moment you get out to DuPage, it's 22nd Street. Yeah, people out in DuPage 75 years ago didn't think too much of Anton Cermak. Alright, I'm heading back towards Cermak Road as the sign indicates. I'm going to be losing this. Listen to the news, but more importantly, start walking around your house. Look at the materials you have. Decide what tools you can use ahead of time. Put an emergency evacuation bag together, even if it's just a pillowcase. You know, throw a couple cans of soup in there, a bar of soap, an extra toothbrush, some extra clothes, and then if you get forced out at the last possible second, at least you will have something. If you got pets, think about your pets. I'm about to lose you here at the corner of 17th and Cermak. Think ahead, think ahead, think ahead. And remember that the experts are imperfect, so you might have heard a good idea from me, but think it through. And if you hear good ideas from the people on TV, think it through. Think for yourselves. Don't follow the herd. Do not follow the herd mentality. Think, think, think. Thank you for watching Feldspar Television Productions. Tell all your friends and family, even if you can't stand me. Tell your friends and family. Even if you disagree, tell everyone.